Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Merritt, and this is a special book review for the Sword and Laser Kickstarter that we promised to do because Walter Spence was nice enough to back us and make Season 2 video possible.
Yes, we are really excited. I'm Veronica Belmont, and I always get a little nervous when I have to read and review a book that I'm not very familiar with, and especially from a new author. But we are talking about House of Shadows here by Walter Spence, and I was actually, and I'm not even saying this because he was a Kickstarter backer, I was really pleasantly surprised by this book.
We were both very relieved that we really liked the book.
Yes, it was definitely true.
There's two things going on. One is we don't review books. We do the book club. I guess we review our book picks that we do monthly on the show. But that's kind of in concert with everybody. It's that book club feel of what did you think of the book. But we don't do formal book reviews the way like Tor.com or SF Signal or IO9 do.
We have reviews on the website, but those are all audience driven. They're reviews that are sent in to us by our audience members who are reading stuff on their own time. They're original reviews, and we just don't have the time, Tom and I, to really review books all that often. So this is a new change of pace for us. Yeah,
and we kind of put that level of backing out there as a Hail Mary pass, thinking like, nobody's probably going to do it, but if they do, then we'll overcome our fears, and we'll read the book and, hopefully we'll get something out of it. And more, thankfully and relievedly, if that is even a word, not only did I get something out of it, but I really enjoyed it, and I want to read the next book in the series.
Well, I think part of the issue is, even if we didn't like the book for some reason, or if we had issues with the book, part of the Kickstarter, part of the idea of doing this Kickstarter level is that we would give you feedback on the book, because we do, someone out there apparently values our feedback, which is incredible of itself. But I felt that even if for some reason I didn't enjoy the book, I would have constructive criticism to give, and potentially some information that Walter would find helpful.
Right.
Feedback for feedback's sake, because it's always nice as a writer, and I think Tom and I have both been there to pass your book along to someone who isn't emotionally invested in your own well-being and can give you an honest and deliberate piece of feedback about that writing without having to sugarcoat it.
If we ever do this level of Kickstarter again, I'll probably phrase it differently as, we'll beta read your book and give you feedback, and then you can decide what to do with it. But Walter was great. He's a gentleman. He was a pleasure to speak with and get to know over the course of kind of negotiating, like, okay, this is when we're going to be able to read it. This is what we're going to be able to do with it. He was very much not wanting to be on the Hangout. He's very sensitive to, like, I don't want people to just think that I'm some jerk who, is forcing the book in front of people. He just wanted to help out the show. He wanted to see season 2 made, but he also was curious with what we thought. So, big thanks to Walter for being such a cool guy in not only backing the show, but also in being sensitive to the audience and understanding, like, hey, I know what makes this book club special, and I don't want to tread on that.
Right. Well, let's talk about the book then. I think we've set this up pretty extensively at
House
this point.
of Shadows is the name of the book. There are other books called House of Shadows because you can't copyright a title. So look for the one by Walter Spence if you're out there looking at this. It is a book about vampires, which, I'll be honest, I was like, right, there's a lot of books about vampires out there. I'm not sure what I'm going to think of this. But the mythology that Walter created behind them, while dealing in the familiar world of not being able to go out in the sunlight very very easily, living off of sucking the blood of humans, I felt he found a way to make the story feel interesting without feeling like, well, oh, this is a Twilight vampire, or this is a classic Stoker vampire, or this is a True Blood vampire.
Yeah, I came into this story, Tom, like we mentioned, Tom had been kind of handling the negotiation process of how this was going to work, and I had kind of held back, and so I didn't even really know that this was a vampire story. And so I started reading the book, and it kind of kicks off with Eugene, who's this young boy with his sister, and they're basically digging through the trash. and they've had a really tough upbringing. And this benefactress kind of comes into their life. She sees something in the two children, and she, makes their life much better. She gives them gifts. She gives them clothing. She, sends them presents. She sends them money. She gets them set up with school stuff, and it vastly improves their standing, not just in their own personal lives, but in that of the community, and just kind of makes their personalities come out, lets them kind of flower into like these much more well-behaved children that can go on to do great things. They've been elevated in not just monetarily, but also their confidence. And then, are we allowed to talk about spoilers here? Is that okay?
I think we should say we are going to talk about spoilers, because I don't think we can fully evaluate the book without doing it. So if you don't want to be spoiled, there you go. Now you know.
And so the book is really great. It's very well written. I mean, the style of writing that he does, it feels very refined. I'm not really sure how else to explain it. But I had been engrossed in the book from the first chapter. And then suddenly we get to this scene where suddenly, Eugene and his sister, Barbara, are at Penelope's house. Penelope is her name. And basically Penelope kind of throws down this ultimatum. Like, one of you are going to die, or she tells us Eugene, she's like, one of you are not going to leave this house alive. You get to choose. Is it going to be you, or is it going to be your sister? And when that happened, all of a sudden, like, the whole book kind of flipped on its head for me, because I had not been expecting it to turn into this kind of book. And then when Penelope actually goes after him and essentially rips his throat out, I was kind of like, what just happened? What is going on here? And I was like, oh my God, she's a vampire. And I guess I probably should have figured that out, because she was like, couldn't really stay out in the sun too much. And she was in like the car with all the blacked out windows and everything. But she was in the sun. She did go outside during the day.
One of the stronger vampires, right, in the ability to tolerate a modicum of sunlight. Most vampires couldn't.
We learn that later.
Yeah.
Of course, we learn that later. And so I was just like really blown away by that scene in particular, and by that shift in the storyline from being one story into something completely different. And I think that was even better for me. It was exciting not knowing what was going to happen.
When you think about vampire stories, you think about obviously Twilight these days. You think about Charlene Harris, the Sookie Stackhouse / True Blood. You think about even Bram Stoker, even Anne Rice. They're all love stories. And that's a really natural way to go with it, right? The dangerous appeal of a vampire to the person who's infatuated with them. And what Walter did, which I found really clever, is he leads you to think that that's what's going on. He even leads you to think that he's got a spin on it, because it's a young man being lured in by an older woman. She's a cougar of vampires, right? And so you think, oh, okay, I get what he's doing. It's not the young woman being lured in by the big vampire guy. It's the older woman luring in the young man. That's interesting. And then, like Veronica says, all of a sudden tears that apart and like, oh no, I'm not falling in love with you, Eugene. I'm going to eat you and let your sister go, or vice versa. But one of you is going to die. And then it turns into a mystery story, because Eugene wakes up. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know why he is. He doesn't know how he survived. And Penelope's gone, right? She's nowhere to be found. And so he has to figure out, with the help of her assistant, who he knew as her driver, back in the day, and is now older because he's not a vampire, to try to figure out. And all of a sudden, now we're in not even a noir mystery story, not a detective story, but just a straight-on whodunit. Like, oh crap, like, what is going on? And that I thought that was great, because it sets you up for something that you think, okay, this is going to be different, and then it's so much more different than you expected.
Yeah. And Eugene / Damien / Mordant is like, he's like a good solid guy. He's got these hungers now. But like he goes out of his way to kind of defend that child from oh yeah, and then there's all the weird stuff with like the people like talking to him through other people's bodies, and yeah, things got pretty intense. I kind of forgot about that whole part of the storyline for a second. Yeah, there's some weird stuff that goes down in this book, but it made it so interesting because it really does get very mysterious and very, like, what is the next spin going to be? Because
Well,
you
'cause
know
there are
there's going to be,
layers.
huh?
There's layers.
Layers upon layers. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think I think that was another thing, that he doesn't just have the mystery of, Eugene wondering what happened. Eugene finds some people, and then you think, oh, okay, so he's been taken in by these people. Oh, wait a minute, he's their prisoner now. Well, why
yeah.
is that? Who are they? How did he get across the world? And what are their intentions? What happened to Penelope? Is it Penelope? Do I have that
Mhm.
right? What happened to her? And then you get introduced to this entire idea of the houses and the
Right.
world of the vampires and the governance of the vampires, which I always find that part very interesting. That sort of politics of the supernatural.
Well, I
Uh,
liked it too that in this world the vampires just don't really give a crap about people. Like they're like totally, besides the humans that kind of take care of their day-to-day tasks and they occasionally feed from, like they don't really interact with humans all that much at all. They kind of stay out of politics or like, yeah, we could be, you know, forces within the political world, forces within the governments, but we don't really want to. Like, why would
yeah.
we do that?
That
That's
would be
dumb.
like us
Boring.
going into the insect world and being like, we want to dominate you insects. Like that's the attitude I get from the
Yeah.
vampires. They're like, well, yeah, we might use you like humans use bees sometimes and keep bees, but really we don't really care. Like it's not, other than, some basic sustenance. We don't need all of you. There's too many.
Mhm. So I like that. Yeah, the houses, vampires having houses in this kind of hierarchy is somewhat more traditional, so that he kind of comes back into like the traditional lore
Little
of
Song of Ice and Fire
vampirism.
feel.
A
Yeah.
little
House
bit.
Winterfax.
I think that's
House Movers.
pre Song of Ice and Fire though. Those kinds of ideas are more like the
Oh,
medieval
for sure.
houses, that
No, I'm
all.
not saying George R. R. Martin
Are
invented
you
it,
saying
but
that
it's
Walter Spence ripped off George R. R.
so
Martin?
ripped
Is
off
that
George
is
R. R.
that your
Martin.
big
It's inconsiderate.
takeaway?
Oh my God. No, but it's that kind of feel, and obviously, yeah, Martin ripped it off from history as well. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, yeah. So I overall I really enjoyed the book and it did make me want to read the next one. I even remember commenting to Ryan, my husband, being like, "Oh man, this book is crazy. What is happening?" And he's like, "What are you reading?" I'm like, "This thing for the Kickstarter for Sword and Laser. It's really good." So there was a lot of surprise and delight involved with reading this book. And I went to the Goodreads page and checked it out, and apparently they did it as a giveaway for a couple of like book clubs or ebook clubs, and people were also similarly like really really pleasantly surprised by how well written the book was and how interesting the characters were.
It was well written, well edited, very polished. A lot of times you may see Kindle singles out there, or Kindle only versions, and searching for something, and you may wonder about that sort of thing. You don't have to have any worries in that respect. It's very competently put together. And I guess if I had to classify it, and we don't have to, it's going to be the most similar with Anne Rice in some ways, in that she tends to deal not just with love stories, but also with wider implications, and that idea of Eugene's, that like, no, I'm not going to feed, I'm not going to be a vampire, I don't want it, I didn't choose this is not what I want to be. That's a very Anne Rice notion. But other than the politics and that sort of aspect, it isn't like Anne Rice in many many other ways. It
I
really
would not
does
have that
forge its
problem.
own direction.
Well, if you turned into a vampire, Tom, what would you be like okay with feeding off of people, or would you try to like withstand the forces,
Well, see, it depends on
dark
what vampire
forces?
world you end up in, right? If it's the world like Eugene ended up in, where it's like you're just going to be weak and sick unless you eat human blood, and no, there's no substitute. You can't eat
Hmm.
rat blood and get by. Then yeah, I'm going to try to come up with a system like what Walter came up with here. It's like somebody who volunteers, maybe. I don't,
Yeah.
somebody I can be like, yeah, just leave it in the fridge for me. I'll be fine.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't want to. I'd want to come up with another way of doing it. It's a very interesting analog that most vampire stories sort of touch on lightly, which is vegetarianism versus eating meat, right?
Yeah.
We as humans eat blood. We eat meat, and meat has blood in it. And people who eat rare meat really do eat blood, but it's not human blood, right? We just don't eat ourselves. For vampires, eating humans' blood is no different than us eating animals, right? They're not human
Yeah.
anymore.
Human cattle.
Yeah.
So I would be okay with it, I think. I don't think I would want to like
You're
murder
just like,
people.
I give this long, like, agonized explanation. And you're like, yeah, I'd be okay with it.
I
And
think I'd probably be okay with it. I'd probably do like this seduction and thrall scenario. Like I'd probably like seduce someone to be my blood thrall or whatever, and then just like
You'd just
keep
be in
him.
it for the chase.
Yeah, and then I would just like he'd like hang out in a little loincloth, and I would just like, and he'd be totally cool. Like it'd be the best thing ever for him. He'd be like stoked because that's all he would know.
Right.
So like a blood slave.
So if you were Eugene, you wouldn't have woke up agonizing. You would have been like, well, I guess I need to get where do I get a blood slave?
Yeah,
Can you help
is
me
there
out with
like a
that?
number I can call? Is there like is it in the yellow pages? We just lost like 3 viewers. They were like, nope, Belmont, nope, gross, get out of here, we're gone.
I'm curious. When he got to the house and they were like, well, we're just pretty much going to kill you because we don't need more of you.
Yeah.
Which again, like you pointed this out earlier, but I like that idea that the vampires are like, no, we're elites. We don't want to dominate things. We dominate things already. We don't need to make more vampires. We don't need to conquer things. That's more humans, more problems. essentially. So him kind of skating by being interesting was a cool device. What did you think of that world of House Winterfax?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense because, like you said, you kind of expected him to show up at this house and be brought into this world and welcomed into the fold. And they're very like, we didn't sign off on this. Like, this is not part of the deal.
You're not pre-approved.
You are not. We did not pre-approve you for the vampire loan. You are not like, yeah, we did not co-sign, sign on the dotted line in blood. So yeah, that was surprising. And then they kind of get into like the hierarchy and explain how the whole thing works and how, Penelope was the head of House Ember, and then, Winterfax and all the different vampire families, and how he has to have like a vampire name and also has to have a nickname. So suddenly his nickname is Damien because that's what his sister used to call him, and Mordant is his house name, I guess. The naming thing was a little confusing. Suddenly there were a lot of names because Penelope's nickname for him
it's
was
the opposite, isn't it? Damien's his house name and Mordant is his public vampire name to the other houses or something.
Oh, is it?
That's
the thing. I think there were too many names involved because he's Eugene, he's Ace,
he did
Mordant,
put a cast of
he's
characters
Damien.
at the end for you.
That was
helps.
helpful.
Yeah.
But initially it's kind of, I don't know if there needs to be quite so many names involved.
I do think who was the lady that like drove him out of the house and he almost burned up?
The crazy
Argenta?
one?
Is that Argenta?
I think that's Argenta.
She was a little bit too Bellatrix Lestrange for me at times. Like, okay, I get crazy is crazy and that's fine, but maybe a little more motivation for why she was crazy, and maybe that comes in future books. I don't know.
I thought she was going to be like lovable crazy.
Yeah,
and it turned out she was like batshit murderous crazy.
She's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which that may be better because lovable crazy seems to be always the cheap out, and to make her be like, nope, just batshit crazy. That's
like cool. Crazy. I can kind of see the future, what's going to happen.
Right. There's a reason. Oh, she's disturbed, but it's her gift as well. Which there's a little bit of that.
There is a little bit of that.
It's a really interesting combination of tropes here because Eugene is a little bit of an Arthurian character in that he has been thrust into the lead of his house from obscurity.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting too that last that big battle scene out in the woods with the humans and Eugene against the
cabin in the woods.
The scary family that kills people all the time. It has the battle royale style fights. What else is that like? Like Predator. They're like Predator. They pluck humans and send them free to chase after them for the fun of it.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of badass. He's like, okay, you and you go. You two stay here. And the other people I'm pretty sure they just died. And then he turned the other two into vampires.
Yeah.
I was like, that was kind of badass. You basically just was like, okay, you people go distract them and die.
Because I'm going
to kill them.
Not going to be okay with that. As soon as he does it, he's like, no, he's not supposed to be doing that. He's not allowed. He's on thin ice as it is already. Now he's going to make vampires.
Yeah.
No.
So then that happened, and she was not pleased. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Unless you have any more Any more
That
questions?
is House of Shadows. As I mentioned, you can find it on Amazon. There's a Kindle version of it. I read it on iBooks myself.
I read it on. I did it on Kindle.
So we're actually doing this for Walter. So thank you again, Walter. I hope that you found this at least entertaining, if not useful in some way. And give Walter your thanks too on Goodreads as well. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Walter. Take care.